Hello, everyone. So welcome back. After the rich holiday season, we begin a new year. And an interesting thing is, Judaism is full of paradoxes. All right, you all know that. Starting with ourselves, we're all walking paradoxes, filled with contradictions and different voices tugging at us one direction to the next. You recognize, like the guy that came out of that was discussing with his non-Jewish colleague, and he was saying to him that in our town we have an interesting mix. We have a psychiatrist, a psychotic, a neurotic, a philosopher, basically every type of personality. So he said, in my town we also have that. He says, no, but in my town it's all one person. So, in the paradox of Judaism, I find here an interesting contrast. And that contrast is that here we just came from this month of Tishrei, which, as the Midrash says, it's called the 7th month. In the Bible, the months are not called by name, they're called by number. With Nisan, the month when the Jews left Egypt, being the first month, and then Iyar, the second month, and Tishrei, the month when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, is called Chodesh Hashvi, the 7th month. So all the biblical readings about the holidays will always refer to the 7th month. Actually, the months like Tishrei, Cheshvan, and so on, the names we use, came later. It says these are the names when the Jews were exiled to Babylon. So in Babylon, they gave them Babylonian names. So those some names are referred to in the Tanakh, but most came from later, not biblical times, but later times. So Chodesh HaShvi, the Medrash says, what's Shvi? Shvi means 7, but Shvi also has another meaning. It means to be satiated, sated. Comes from, like we say, V'achalta v'savata. I ate and I was filled. I was sated. So Chodesh HaShvi means it's a month that's saturated, sated with, filled with holidays. You have Rosh Hashanah, you have Yom Kippur, you have Sukkot. Basically, almost every day of the month is a holiday. If not a holiday, it's a day before the holiday, or day after the holiday. So it's called Meruba B'Moedeh. So Shvi also means, the number 7 refers to a rich month. Which in itself is interesting, that it's all bunched together. Why not spread them out? But it gets more paradoxical when you look at the next month, which we just began today. Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. Today is the second day of Rosh Chodesh, a new month, began yesterday and today. And here there's not one holiday in the entire month. Not one. Next month, Kislev, will have at the end of the month, there's Hanukkah. And basically almost every month after that has some holiday. The holiday right after Tishrei is not one holiday. We have Shabbos every 7th day, but no special holiday. And Tishrei has all these bunched up holidays. Holidays are good oasis in time. We call it sometimes moyadim. A moyad means an appointment in time, like an oasis in time. So a holiday is an opportunity to take time off, very basic level, but above all to spiritually regenerate, recharge our batteries. And every holiday has its spiritual power, which I've discussed in the past months and throughout the years, each holiday's power. So why bunch them all together in one month? Why not spread it out? And instead of leaving one so-called barren month that has not one holiday. And it's an interesting contrast, right? From one month with so many holidays, you suddenly jump into this type of month. Now, this may not bother many of you. Maybe you never thought about it. Because, for two reasons. I don't know about you, but many people, the holidays of Tishrei, they don't necessarily feel that much of a high, that they should feel such a low in this month of Cheshvan. But people who truly experience a holiday and see it as a very spiritual, powerful day and experience, definitely feel a certain withdrawal symptoms when you enter into this month. Which is why in Jewish thought you find that there are all kinds of methods of how does one go from inspiration to a regular routine, returning to our routine of our lives. As I said, many people don't have this problem today because the holidays are also part of their routine, and the routine is almost as spiritual as their holidays. I mean to be negative, but that's statistics state that that's more or less like what it's like. But the way it's meant to be is not at all that way. We all know the difficulty that we may get inspired, many of us, and everyone has moments of magical moments, but how long does it last? Anybody has any estimates? How long does it last? In Yiddish there's an expression that many things last from Esther Tanis to Purim. Basically means a day. When we're little kids and we like our little toys, and then our grandmother says, yeah, it's going to last from Esther Tanis to Purim. It's like an expression, it's going to break in a moment. It's like one of these things. Temporary. Everything is temporary. So this is a good opportunity to address this topic on a broader scale, because this isn't just about the holiday, and it's not even only about a Jewish theme. Every human being on this earth has to face this issue, that on one hand, we are products, victims of circumstances. We are products of routines. We're creatures of habit. And we're involved in routines. And our routines are far more powerful than we'll ever imagine. Because once they become a routine, that becomes your default state. And defaults are the place we gravitate back to, even when for a moment, or we have some respite, or we're able to get out of the mode. Jeff. Even when we get out of the mode of our routines, the routines are constantly haunting us. And look at our lives. You see people who are motivated to start something new, to try something new in relationships, and so on. And as inspired as we may be, and motivated as we may be, little time passes, and more or less 99% of the time, if not more, we just gravitate back to our old stuff. So the challenge of how to maintain some type of high and make it part of our lives, integrate it, is a challenge for every human being. And this is like football, I'm saying this is like football. This is like the advertisement period. The people in the stadium, they just have to hang around till the ads get played out. So think of it that way. Got a taste of contemporary life. Welcome back. We shall resume. So the question on the table is this paradox of the month of Cheshvan, the empty month, we shall call it, as in contrast to the full month and rich month, the saturated month of Tishrei. So I began by saying that this is a dilemma we all have. Is there moments of great inspiration in our lives, magical moments, sacred moments? Times you go to a wedding or something else special happens and you feel inspired and ready to do something new. And then we fall right back into our routines. So the truth is, the calendar, the Jewish calendar, like I've often discussed, is really a live organism. It's not just a silent, passive calendar. What I mean by that is time is energy, and the Jewish calendar brings that energy alive, which really means that the annual calendar and its ups and downs are true mirror images that reflect our lives. So if you look at the calendar, and if you ride its waves, you actually can learn to understand yourself in a far deeper level, anticipate, and recognize the rhythms of life. So the first thing that needs to be made, a very clear statement, which I often state again and again, is life is exactly that, a rhythm. Any natural part of the universe knows this innately, even young children. It's we adults that have created this artificial creature called the couch potato. Meaning metaphorically, where there's no movement. We have this idea, I'm just going to hang out. There's no such thing in the natural world. The sun doesn't just hang out, the moon doesn't just hang out. No creature on earth is just hanging out. Everybody's in the process of either feeding, breeding, taking care, loving. Even relaxation is also part of the process, the rhythm of life. But we human beings, whether it's due to our ability to be what we call lazy, slothfulness, or other elements of the human condition, we've created this type of thing. I'd like to just shut everything off. Some people just like, I'd rather not have the ups and downs of life. But you ask any cardiologist, you don't need a cardiologist. If you see a heartbeat that looks like a straight line, which means it's not a beat, actually, it's called death. Straight lines are maybe good there in mathematics. The straight line is the shortest connection between 2 points. But a straight line in life is death. A healthy heart looks like a wave. That's a rhythm, an ebb and a flow, an up and a down. A good balanced life is that the peaks and the valleys are symmetrical. And it's not extreme peaks or extreme dips, drops. But life is all about rhythm and cycle. And when you look at children, you see it. Children are always on the move. We have created things frozen in time. Television, images that are beamed. These are frozen moments and they freeze us. Instead of us being able to be just free and breathing, it freezes numbs our brains. It numbs us. And money and everything that's materialistic is a numbing force. So the material world, think of it as a dead world that deadens the vivacity and the vitality of our spirit. Spirit is always alive, and the material world tends to deaden it. This is really called death. And we slowly die through the years as our arteries harden and as our personalities harden, and as we're subject to the material wear and tear of life and the pressures, it deadens the spirit. And everybody knows in our own hearts how it is. Think of how you were idealistic. Everything was possible when you're young, and then suddenly you have all kinds of reasons. This is not going to work, that's not going to work. Disappointments. We hurt each other, we hurt ourselves, and we become number and number. This is not a verdict. This is not predestined. This is completely up to us, which is why I'm talking about it. But if you let things go on their own and you don't take control of your life, that's exactly what happens. As you get older, you get number. Even though you should be getting wiser and you should be getting more spiritual, we get more materialistic, and materialism by definition is dead, and spirituality by definition is life. And simply put, a body without a soul is a corpse. A soul is what makes it come alive. I'm not necessarily defining soul necessarily in the religious context. I mean soul as spirit, as energy. Energy. What is a wire? What is a generator? What is a channel without energy? All it is a pipe. The body is a great force, but it is nothing without the energy that drives through it, even on a basic biological level. And definitely on a emotional and spiritual level. We can be biologically very healthy and alive, but your emotions are dead and numb, or your intellect is numb and dead. And this is due, the human race is the only species on earth that has this issue called boredom. Animals don't get bored. There's no such thing as a bored animal. Think about it. Think why. The reason, obviously, is because animals also don't have the capacity to transform the earth. They go through their clock, their balance, their cycle is very balanced. They can't create revolution, and they also can't destroy. The human being has the ability to revolutionize in a positive way and also to destroy. That's what is stated in this week's chapter. The flood, which was brought about by the corruption and the cruelty of human beings to each other. So it says, after the flood and after Noah and his children and all the animals of earth come out from the ark, so God says, I will give you, the human race, the power and dominion over all creatures of this earth. Even though they are physically more powerful than you, but look what we've done. Human beings, through the ingenuity, have the ability to dominate and control the animal kingdom. And it can be done for good or it can be done for bad. So we have great responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to keep the world not just alive, but to keep the spirit alive. Which really means living a life that is not just driven by material and selfish gain, but driven by higher purpose. And that's not just a matter of morality and ethics, it's a matter of life and death. So when the Torah says, I give you two paths today, the path of life and the path of death, and you shall choose the path of life, the path of spirit is a path of life. The path of matter, as opposed to spirit, is a path of death. Now you could say, well, materialism is not dead. We see things, people have a lot of money, and a lot of power, they're building empires. Yeah, it's not dead at this moment, but on long term it all dies, because nothing in the material world can survive forever. Everything, matter, erodes, decays. And spirit is eternal. Those that have bound their lives to spirit are the ones that have left a legacy. Those that did not leave anything. And you see this by the nations on earth. There were great nations, great empires, great wealth, numbers that were enormous numbers, and there's not one remnant of their descendants. Not the Romans, and not the Babylonians, and not the Egyptians, and not anyone. I mean, and you have the Jewish people, as the Torah says, Ma'at Mikol Ha'amim, the fewest of nations. And as it says, because it's not based on numbers that determines power. Power is based on spirit, based on quality. And the Jews held on to a qualitative connection that outlived their bodies. And that's what they passed on to their children, and that's why we're here. So it's quite simple, actually. The reason it's not so simple is because when we're here, in the here and now, we get so distracted by the moment that all these ideas are beautiful, but they're almost impossible to live day to day because our routines are driven by the material world. And just look how money controls life. Everyone knows you can't take your money with you to the next world. Nobody has yet mastered that. And still, look how it's worshipped. Even to the last second of last breath of a person's life. Because it creates the illusion of power. Now yes, money can buy many things, but it does not create eternity. You can't buy eternity with money. The pharaohs of old thought that they could buy eternity by burying themselves and their live brides and families together with them in their tombs. That was for them eternity. Not just dying, but killing everyone around them. So yes, so we have a few sphinxes and pyramids in Egypt. That's the memory of that. So in the last few years ago, when there was the Arab Spring, I think the joke went around that Israel sent a telegram to the Egyptians. They said, listen, as you're destroying your country, don't destroy the pyramids and the sphinxes because we're not coming back to rebuild them. You know? However you explain if those were Jewish structures anyway, in the times of Pharaoh of old. But going back now to the theme of this empty month, the interesting thing is like as follows, that in this very busy world in which we live, fast-paced world, fast food world, we're slowly losing, not slowly, probably quickly losing our patience. You know? And if you ever suffer from some road rage, I know nobody likes to admit it, especially after the fact. You're on the road, and you're trying to rush, and there's a rush hour, and you're changing lanes and so on. And then if you really look at down the thing, even as much as you're weaving around, you end up being more or less, not much faster, maybe a car ahead or two of someone else, and sometimes not even that with all the speeding. But we feel like we're rushing, we feel like we're getting somewhere. It's like the guy that the faster they go, the more backwards they are. Because when you're going very fast and you're going the wrong way, you're going to go very fast get very quickly lost. So we live in an age where we have this illusion of speed, and that we can speed things up. And sometimes we can't. Look, computers actually speed things up. You can crunch numbers, find information in ways that are unprecedented. Absolutely unbelievable what can be done today. But don't ever think that has changed human beings. There's certain things that cannot be sped up. For example, it will always take 9 months for a child to gestate in its mother's womb. Yes, it's true with medical miracles today, thank God, a child can be born far earlier and they can keep the child, but everyone knows it's the healthy thing is to state the term. Everything that's real in life does not change. So all the computing power we have, all the technology, all the speed up does not change anything in the natural balance of life. And in a sad way, actually, the paradox in our times becomes even more acute, because once upon a time we didn't have such machines. We didn't have anything. You could press a button and immediately you get results. So no one had the illusion of such speed. So it was a natural thing. You knew. You planted your seeds, and you had to wait for the rains, and you had to have patience to be able to produce food. Today, all you got to do, 24/7 in New York City, you can find any fruit, whether it's in season or not, within 2 blocks from your house. So it's a great gift and a great so-called availability, but if that spills over into thinking that our lives, especially our personal lives, can also be subject to the same speed, that's when major mistakes are made, because it creates this illusion of dominance and power and control, when we really have no much more control today than they did 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago about things like finding a healthy relationship, loving, finding truth, finding God, nurturing your soul. Nothing in technology has changed any of that. Not J-Date and not any other online service. Yes, maybe today we can find people quicker and so on. But the process The normal process that it takes, like I said, for a child to be born, for a seed to gestate, for a fetus to develop, for anything, for creativity to emerge. There's no way you can speed that up. There's a process. You have a dilemma. It takes time for you to get through the dilemma, the frustration, searching for solutions, first being confused, until you find until you conceive of a creative idea how to solve the problem. Nothing can speed that up. So when you ask yourself the good question to ask ourselves is, what is more powerful today in your mind? What is more powerful? Restraint or forward movement? Silence or sound? Yielding or controlling? We live in a world where we create an illusion, not just in this world, but this world that's accelerated, I said, due to technology, where we have forgotten, and it's easy to forget, the process. And the secret of the process is that the greatest things happen when nothing seems to be happening at all. Keep that in mind, and it could solve most of your problems. The quiet moments. What's going on? Here, each of us popped out of our mother's womb at a certain point. Those 9 months when we were in that womb, even our mothers, though they're fully aware and cognizant of carrying a child, but they're not fully aware of everything that's going on, the child developing. All of your life is developing right there. And there's no cameras, and there's no Facebook there, and you can't share a tweet on Twitter. I got that right? Very important to know the difference, not to tweet on Twitter, but to tweet on Twitter, right? You could be sued if you don't express it correctly. And all the other so-called modern marvels of media and attention. There's a story in the Bible, one of the most moving stories, when Moses, the little boy, is being hid by his mother, has to hide him from the Egyptians who want to kill every male child and throw them in the river Nile. So his mother ingeniously weaves a basket for her little boy, and puts him on the river Nile, the same river Nile where they want to drown him. That's where that saves him, which is why later Moses ends up not striking the river, because the river saved his life. Even a river Nile that was being worshipped by the Egyptians as an idol, you have to be sensitive even to a water that saved your life. So Moses' little child is in the basket at the edge of the river Nile among the reeds there, and which is why some call it the Reed Sea, not the Red Sea. And Yocheved, his mother, sends Miriam, the older sister of Moses, to go watch over him. And the Torah says, just in 2 verses, 1 or 2 verses, almost very discreetly, that this little girl would go and watch her brother. And later, because of that, she got great reward that Moses waited for her a certain period in time when they traveled through the wilderness. But the Torah documenting this sensitivity, this, of a small girl watching her little brother, the power of that, which doesn't usually get awards and it's not headlines, that's where the power lies. When a mother or a sister or a brother nurtures a child, those are quiet moments. Maybe during a birthday party, it's full of fireworks. But the greatest moments in life are the ones that are very quiet. There's no one around. And that's where lives are shaped and changed. But again, we live in a world of externals. We need action. And when there's action, there's noise, and we get all inspired. Appreciating these type of moments is something that is a lost art. So we have the month of Cheshvan in a cycle that teaches us that precisely an empty month, that's when the greatest things happen. Tishrei is great for its fireworks, for the whole light and sound show. You have Rosh Hashanah and its power, and Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, and Simchas Torah, you name it. The whole it's a party time from beginning to end. And not only party, you have also sacred moments, you have celebrating moments. The whole spectrum of life is celebrated in Tishrei, and beautiful ways. But then comes a month of Cheshvan, which ostensibly, on the surface level, is empty of holidays. It's regular life. But it's in these regular moments in the quiet moments where the most powerful things take place. This is true across the board. Every metamorphosis, the way the Kabbalists put it, every growth, every metamorphosis requires 3 stages. There's the initial stage. Then there's a vacuum or a void, what they call the yesh, and then there's a ayin, and then there's a yesh. You need to have a vacuum and a void that, in a sense, metamorphosizes the situation, and that emerges and conceives a new birthing takes place. That void and that vacuum is that invisible place. It's the place where nothing seems to be happening, but everything's happening then. And it's the place that we human beings have no control over, which is perhaps one of the reasons we're so reluctant to embrace it, because we live in a world, as I said, it's also a world of control. We want to have control. I want to own something. That's the place where all great things happen. There's an expression in the sages tell us that la'olam, a person should always be flexible like a reed, and not inflexible, rigid like a cedar. La'olam yehi adam rach ka'kana v'al tehei kosher ka'araz. Now, when you look at a cedar tree, one of the most powerful trees, it's upright, it's unwavering, it seems far more powerful than a small little reed that is flimsy and barely standing on its own. But what happens when a great wind strikes, when there's a storm? So the tree can fall because of its power and its rigidity. It may be powerful, but not always powerful. It's not powerful. It's not all powerful. Something can be more powerful than it. The reed will never be destroyed in a storm because it goes with the wind. It's flexible. Same thing in human life. People who are very powerful people and are very intelligent and put together. So yes, they may have a lot of control while they're in control, but everybody has moments of vulnerability. Everyone has times when we're not strong. And when you don't have flexibility, you can't yield, those are the times that one can get destroyed. Because precisely your strong-headedness and your obstinance, which may work for a person in many situations, but if it's the wrong situation, it may work against them. And then your resistance becomes very strong, and you crack as a result. In the spheres, in the Kabbalistic 10 spheres, there's a thing called Netzach and Hoid. Sphere number Chesed is Chochmah Bina Das is 3, Chesed Gvur is 6, 7 and 8. Sphere 7 and 8. Netzach and Hoid. Netzach means victory, but it means ambition. It's drive. Hoid is its antithesis. It means humility. So we all need in life, we need to have a drive, but we also have to have humility to balance it. And it seems antithetical if you think about it. Well, that's part of the paradox. You don't have to be weak to be yielding, and if you're yielding, it doesn't mean that it could be yielding and very powerful. You could be very powerful and very weak. It all depends on what's the driving force. So when you think about it from a perspective of, let's say, a void or a vacuum, when a butterfly emerges from the cocoon of the chrysalis, after a caterpillar goes into that stage. So if you looked at it from an outside perspective, you have to wonder, what is the psychology of a caterpillar compared to a butterfly? Does the caterpillar knows it's going to become a butterfly? Because the caterpillar can't fly and the butterfly can. So what happens? So there's once a book someone gave me, I forgot what it's called, but it was a very interesting book. It was like an illustrated book, almost like a children's book, but it had this profound lesson. The first half of the book was the conversation with the caterpillar, and the second was a conversation with the butterfly. So the caterpillar, crawling around, then comes its time when it begins to close up in its cocoon. And as the cocoon closes in, the caterpillar thinks it's dying, because it gets darker and darker. From brightness, suddenly it gets dusk, until it gets completely dark, and the caterpillar thinks it's going to die. And maybe it does die in a certain way. Only to emerge a little while later, slowly it opens up, and the butterfly emerges. So it's an excellent lesson in metamorphosis, an excellent lesson in growth. How many times does this happen in our lives? may not be precisely like a caterpillar and a butterfly, but we start as little children, completely dependent on others, and then at some point we develop independence, and then we learn to fly on our own, hopefully. Now, of course, if we weren't nurtured with self-confidence as we were children, it's going to be very hard to fly later. But that's besides that. Even if it was a completely healthy type of growth, that's one general example in life chronologically. But how many other times in life do we have these opportunities? The answer is every day. Every day when you're born, it's considered to be a new birth, like a Beri Chadasha, a new creation, refreshed in the morning. However, we live with the past and we live with the baggage and the memories of what happened yesterday, and that haunts us and it weighs us down. It's hard to experience that type of refreshed experience. But that's precisely what is the challenge that we have. But the first thing is to do is the mindset to understand that we have to go through a process of almost shedding one layer of skin if you want to assume a new layer. And until you learn to embrace the secret of that so-called nothing stage, that void, and have the humility to submit to it and respect it, you really can never grow. That type of impatience that we just want to pop out, we want to press the button and move quickly, is exactly what doesn't let you really grow. So we become our own worst enemy because we're not respecting that element, the void, the vacuum. In technology and engineering, vacuums are the forces that create the most power. They generate the most power and energy. You think of a black hole. So Einstein predicted the black hole based on his calculations. Then he retracted it. And then later in life, once it started being proven, he re-embraced it. Or I'm not even sure, but when he died, he may have still rejected it. But today it's proven. What's a black hole? A black hole is a description of a powerful star whose gravitational pull is so intense that it doesn't even let light escape, which creates this weird situation that it's full of light, but light can't leave because the gravity pulls it, sucks it in. So how do we know it's there? That's why it's called a black hole. We know it's there because the gravitational pull is affecting all bodies around it. So you start making measurements and you realize that certain stars or other bodies out there in space are being tugged by something, but you can't see what is being tugged by. And when you keep studying these other bodies, you realize there must be something there. It's called extrapolation. So no one ever seen a black hole. You can't see it because light is not escaping. But it has more power, because precisely the power is so powerful it doesn't let light escape. So let's take the psychological black hole. What has more power, grief or joy? What has more power, restraint or expression? So naturally, most of us our inclination, knee-jerk reaction would be that which was which we see. That's how we measure power. But today, especially with science, you realize that's not true at all. The most powerful thing is what you don't see. Let's take the microscopic forces that will shape our lives. One, God forbid, mutation of 75 trillion cells create more havoc than the most biggest nuclear attack. Talk about nuclear attacks, subatomic particles have far more power today than big tanks and machines. So it's not about volume, it's not about quantity. Today we realize that power has nothing to do with quantity. And the most powerful forces are completely invisible. What shapes existence, what shapes you and I right now, are forces that you will never see in your entire life. Why does one person get angry at a situation, or the same situation happens to someone else, they don't get angry? So we go to therapy and pay top dollar to trying to find out why. You'll never really be able to find the culprit. You may be able, through extrapolation, find your black hole that's exerting such influence on you. Basically, our unconscious is what impacts our conscious all the time. Our conscious. What ideas come into your mind? Why do you get certain ideas? I get different ideas. Some people don't have ideas. Some people are innovative. Some people, what shapes all these things? Almost on a daily basis. We're all looking for the secret, the elixir. We're looking for some call it mazel, luck, prayers, some superstition, ayin haras. We've got a whole list of culprits called the usual suspects. But most of it is not magical at all. It's forces that you can't see. That's simple as that. But we are very uncomfortable with that. We want to see it. We want to control it. We want to own it in some way, because then we feel that we are able to control our lives, our destinies. You start controlling your life when you realize you're not in control. I know it sounds weird. What does that mean? That gives you control, because you realize that there are forces that you cannot physically, you can't press a button. It's not going to work that way. Love and relationships is the best example. All the mistakes people make is because they're trying to do it. They're trying to do something. Okay, I'll do it different this time. Maybe you shouldn't try to do anything. Maybe you should just try to try not to try, so to speak. Realize that there are things that emerge. And if we didn't let all our so-called defensive mechanisms and all the different machinations and manipulations that we go through to protect ourselves and just be, you may have all your problems solved. But what does it mean to just be? Does anyone know the secret of just being? That's a very unsafe place for many people. What do you mean just being? Most people, you tell me to just be, that's not so simple. If I'm just going to be, I'm going to be hurt. I'll be taken advantage of. Well, that's exactly. We live in an unsafe world, and we have experienced insecurity, and we built all kinds of things to protect ourselves, and those are the forces that we employ when we want to solve problems. Now, they're good for solving problems when you're under attack, maybe direct attack, so you have a good arsenal and all your armor. But it's not good to build a relationship. It's not good for love. You can't love and war. I know for some it's the same thing, but love and war shouldn't be synonymous. You know, the difference between an engagement and a battle, right? The joke goes, the engagement is what happens before the marriage. That's what they say. You know, I don't like these type of jokes, but I'm just using it fitted into this subject matter here. So love is a good example, because in a strange way, God blessed us with something we must have, love. And love forces you to have to confront something that you can't do. You can't buy love 24/7 like you buy fruits out of season. It doesn't work that way. Love is completely subject to real process. And it's just like a child. You cannot speed up the process. 9 months and that's it. Nobody will ever change that. Now I know some people will say, well, maybe with the test tube babies in the laboratory we'll figure out. God protect us that we shouldn't figure out how to speed up that process. Not because we're tampering with nature, because some things should have a process. What do you want to have, seeds that magically grow into trees? What kind of life would that be? In other words, there's a reason for this. The reason is to appreciate that the mystique of life is more powerful than the things we are aware of. What we see on the surface is a small percentage, and it does not shape what life is about. But this word is itself, you know, I use this expression in Toward a Meaningful Life, and many people have reacted to it. But first initially disturbed, but then after thinking about it, realized the depth of it. And that is that intimacy and relationships, the ultimate healthy relationship is a person who knows how to celebrate vulnerability. That's the expression I use. I intentionally use that word because I knew that it would like, you know, most people celebrate vulnerability sounds like, what do you mean? Vulnerability isn't really a very good thing to have. Why would I celebrate my vulnerability? I'd protect it. I'd hide it. I'd make sure to compensate, to not be so vulnerable. Vulnerability sounds like but vulnerability is only dangerous in a dangerous world. Since when is vulnerability a bad thing if you're dealing with healthy people? Vulnerability is really the true nature of life. But because we've been hurt, and I'm not judging anyone, because we've been hurt, we don't let our vulnerability out, and we're not ready to expose it because we don't want it to be taken advantage of. But what do we get in return? We get in return a very, basically an armed, what's the word I want to use? A human being that's completely protected by layers and layers of armor, and nothing can get in, nothing can get out. And you become somebody that you never were in the first place. Young newborn children are completely vulnerable. Is that a bad or good thing? It's a bad thing if you have bad people. It's a great thing if you have good people. Because vulnerability is a sign of trust. It's a sign of being able to grow. It's a sign of, it's the power to be flexible. And in that sense, vulnerability is a very, very pure force. So the challenge is, how do we maintain our vulnerability in a world that is dangerous? That's the challenge. I'm not just suddenly suggesting we should all become vulnerable, because the fact is there are criminals in this world. And I don't just mean criminals in the literal sense. I mean the people who do take advantage. There are exploiters. But on the other hand, you don't want to destroy your most valuable asset, which is your vulnerability, which is your soul. Your soul is like a newborn child, and is the secret to all true growth. So here you have this month of Cheshvan as a model that helps us understand this element. So let's take it to the next level here. Discuss it a little further and how we can embrace such a thing. There's an expression. It's connected to Rosh Chodesh actually. When Rosh Chodesh is on a Sunday, which means then Shabbos is called Shabbos Machar Chodesh. Okay, so we say a special haftarah. When Shabbos is Erev Rosh Chodesh, we say a special haftarah. Several times, it happens once or twice a year. And the haftarah is called Machar Chodesh. Machar Chodesh, tomorrow will be the new month. And it's a haftarah that comes from the story of David and Jonathan. Jonathan was the son of, Yonasan was the son of Saul, King Saul, who was the first king in Israel. And in the beginning, David, who was very close with Jonathan, David was beloved by Saul. But when Saul sensed that a certain sense that David would become the next king, he began to hate him and to pursue him till his death. Everyone knows the story with the spider, right? Yeah, that's the story with David escaping from Saul. But David and Jonathan remained very close. So the story goes like this. Yonasan, and the haftarah begins. Yonasan said to David, and this is the time where David was already now being afraid to be in Saul's presence because he knew that he was Saul was ready to kill him. So David says, every Rosh Chodesh there was a party, a Rosh Chodesh party. The king would have a party, and of course David was always at these parties, together with Jonathan, together with other ministers and people in the kingdom, in the palace. This time, David was not going to show up at the party. So Yonasan says, tomorrow will be Chodesh, will be the new month. There'll be the regular party in my father's palace, and your seat will be empty. And then he uses a powerful expression. He says, "V'nifkadeta ki yipoked meishavecha," and you will be remembered because your seat is empty. In Hebrew, the word nifkadeta means to be remembered, and yipoked meishavecha also means emptiness. So absence is what creates, what we use. There's the cliche. Absence creates, what's the word? With absence, right? But what is the deeper meaning in it? So there's our wise sages. This comes from, I believe, Mr. Spock in Star Trek. Leonard Nimoy, right? He was Jewish, and I think his sign was from a Kohen. That's what they say. So I don't know if there's any Trekkies around here, but there's one of the expressions that he uses that is a pretty good classic. He says, it's always more pleasant or more pleasurable to want than to have. He's telling it to somebody who's really lusting something that Mr. Spock had. He says, remember, it's always better to want. It's always more pleasurable to want than to have. Because once you have it, it's never as pleasant. Now, this is if you really think about it, there are many interesting books. Have you read Foucault's Pendulum from, what's his name, the Italian writer? Umberto, yeah. Umberto, right. So it's one of these profound books, but like many other themes, these books have the message of being essentially, put it in one line, not to spoil the punchline there. I won't spoil it anyway because it's until you get to it. Is that the journey? The destination is the journey. And though it's become a bumper sticker and a cliche, the truth is there's a lot of profundity in it. The people, I think it was Henry James that said about happiness, or it was another philosopher, I'm not sure who it was, that said about happiness, no, it was not him, it was John Stuart Mill, who said that if you look at happy people, all real happy people never pursue happiness. It's unhappy people that pursue happiness. Why? It's not the exact words he uses. Why is that? Because happiness is what happens when you're not pursuing it. That's what real happiness. Maybe that's why happy comes from the word happens. Okay, that's my own little play of words. In other words, happiness emerges. It's not something you can acquire. It's not something you can buy. And the more you try to find it and discover it, the less you'll have it. What does this mean? Happy people are focusing not on themselves and on their happiness. They're focusing on what they should be doing. And when they feel that they belong, when you feel you're doing what you should be doing with your life, that naturally results in happiness. There are things in life that you can directly acquire, and there are things that can only emerge after you do other steps. You have this also, between Pesach and Shavuos we count 49 days, right? But then it says the 50th day, we don't count. And the 50th day when it emerges, Sinai. But you can't have 50 without the 49. This is true throughout all of life. Everything great in life works that way. You do your part, and then a process begins that you cannot directly control. But it's a direct result of your efforts. So it's not some magical thing. I mentioned children. Yes, it takes a father and a mother to conceive a child. They have to do that. But then the development is completely miraculous. How an egg gets fertilized, how it breaks, the cells divide, how it turns into suddenly pop out, here we are. No one can understand that. So it's really a combination of our efforts and knowing when to let go, because you cannot deal with the next step. All you can do is prepare the ground. You take a seed, you plant it in the ground, you water it. Things happen. You'll never be able to figure it out. You can't replicate it on a table. Yeah, you can create maybe a plant on your table, but the power of the earth, and vegetation, the power of the earth. So the challenge is when to know what to be doing something and when to let go. When to make your effort, when to press the gas and when the brakes. And this is the question. I believe in our time, a lot of people know how to make a move, but they don't know how to stop. They don't know when to let go. They don't know how to appreciate something emerging. So, and one of the reasons is, as I said, because we live in an unsafe world, and we're basically overcharged tools and weapons and mechanisms that are constantly in move. We're constantly in motion, essentially. We're always vigilant, basically. That ability to just let go and let something emerge, celebrate vulnerability, is far, far more rare and precious commodity today. And I'm not criticizing. I know the reasons. The reasons are because it's the blind leading the blind. And, living in an unsafe world, that's what happens. Growing up in unsafe homes, environments, we develop as children all these mechanisms to protect ourselves. We're hyper vigilant, hyper alert. We immediately sense when there's danger. Some of us are excellent at that. But that creates also a certain type of, what's it called, overdrive, where you don't have the ability to just be, to just stop and just be yourself. You don't even know what it means. It's hard to even imagine that it can be a comfortable place. Many people become even addicted to potential danger, because that's when they feel alive. They feel there's something, I'm worth something, because I'm protecting myself. I know how to protect. I can go on and on. I think there are many examples of it. I'm not just trying to broaden it, because each of us, it manifests in our lives in different ways. So that's why precisely after the rich month, the holiday rich month of Tishrei, comes a month that's completely empty. It's exactly the point. It's to give us the exact contrast. It's not about let's spread out the parties once a month or evenly paced. It's precisely that. There's a time when you were supposed to be in high action mode and gather resources and do whatever you got to do. And then comes Cheshvan. Cheshvan is a gestation period. It's a period when we're supposed to be exercising the other tool, which is restraint. What happens when everything is quieted down, when the party is over? What do you have going for you then? Those quiet moments. I can tell you, just as an example for myself as a writer, the hardest moments are the most precious moments. The hardest moments is when you're alone in the middle of the night and you have no clue what you're going to do when you have a deadline and you have to write something. And it's extremely, you start saying to yourself, maybe I'll go to sleep, I'll do it tomorrow, but then the deadline is looming. And you have no clue what to do. You're frustrated. You start looking for ways to figure it out. And then when it finally comes, you realize that those moments of frustration are the absolutely most valuable moments of all. because that gives birth to something. And it's precisely because you're not comfortable. If you're comfortable, and trust me, we all want to be comfortable. Rather just have, it's done. I always dream, okay, what's it going to feel like the hour after I finished? Then you know. And then, I can tell you, then the hour after you start getting very edgy, because you need a new challenge. So the greatest creativity always follows frustration. Or better put, greatest creativity is produced through frustration. Because what's frustration? It means trying to create something new, but you have old stuff. How are you going to create something new from old stuff? So you have to go through some type of confusion, some type of loss to gain. If it's just going to be a product of yesterday's tools, you're just going to have the same old thing again, just rehashed. You want something really new? There's no other way, but breakthroughs mean that there has to be some void. There has to be some break with the past for there to be a breakthrough. That's what a breakthrough means. Now, many of us look at breakthroughs, we watch on television, or we see people get awards, or we see all these success stories like Google and Facebook and so on, and say, wow, look, I wish I had a breakthrough like that. But you're not there the moment before those breakthroughs happened. You're not there with the bankruptcies and the frustrations. Steve Jobs, for some reason, captures people's imagination. I think I know why, because he's a story of paradox, of loss and gain and all the paradoxes. You read the book, Isaacson's book, you hate him and you love him all at once. Which is a good example of what life is about. Because he's full of paradoxes. He went under. Apple. He was thrown out of a company he himself founded. How many people bounce back and turn it into a company which they say is going to be the first $1 trillion value company, or close to it? And look at it. Look, every time these iPhones come out, it's like all phenomenon. And he's not even here anymore. So, everyone looks at a great success story. But then you hear about his life. Didn't know who his father was. Would you give your life, would you want to have a life like his? If you had to write the script from the beginning? Would he be who he is had he not had all that void? So I'm not trying to say that we should embrace the voids of our life. Obviously we should avoid as much pain as possible, but the things that are given to us, that are realities that you cannot control, it's futile to try to fight it. So it's a question of how you use that dark hole to become a powerful force. How does a black hole become a force that can help your life instead of destroy your life? That's the great challenge. And that's why we have an entire month that exactly precisely that. You don't have all the power of a month of Tishrei. You don't have any holidays per se. You have, every month has its special days, obviously. But it's a month where you don't have the Torah, the biblical or the rabbinic holidays. And as such, it gives us opportunity to look at the part of life that's that's silent. The moments that are quieter, the moments that are not celebrated, and they're not demonstrable. You can't really identify them. But those are the moments that shape everything. They shape everything. So you ask yourself the question, how can I go there if it's invisible? You can go there because you have that invisible part inside of you. You just have to use different tools. If you want to go there with a vehicle, you're not going to get there. If you want to go there with, let's say, a motorcycle, or just using that as a cool vehicle, or some other physical vehicle, you're not going to get there. So what vehicle do you use to go inside your invisible place? Think about it. So I'll give you a few thoughts on this, a few practical suggestions. One is music. Music takes us deeper inside ourselves than does regular sound and words. Music touches something, it resonates. It goes deeper than the conventional language. And then there's a thing called silence that's even more powerful than music. So there's a music with a sound, there's music without a sound. Silence. So today people exercise silence in many different ways. You have silence in meditation, silence in shutting things down. But there's silence in, not just that you're sitting in a silent room and there's no noises, that's definitely conducive, but also a silence of being able to just allow your soul to speak to you instead of you speaking to it. The outer you speaking to the inner you instead of, and the inner you speaking to the outer you instead of the outer you speaking to the inner you. And that is an exercise that is not so difficult as you may think. The reason it's difficult is because we're not used to doing it. We're not used to doing it because, as I said, we have all our mechanisms in place. But look, we all have times when we're alone. Hopefully. Some people are terrified of being alone. But I'm telling you, you have to have time to be alone. And when you're alone, you should be less terrified, right? There's no one there to hurt you. So that's a time which is called self-nurturing, finding a way to let your own voice speak to you. Now, I find that when you know how to read something in the Torah, especially Hasidic teachings, Pnimis HaTorah it's called, the inner Torah, that talks about the soul and mystical ideas, is very conducive to letting your soul speak to you, because if you let it resonate, it starts speaking to you back to you, as opposed to you imposing something. But the challenge is this, finding even silence also needs a language to speak to speak the language of silence, the sound of silence. And we're so accustomed to stimulation that comes from outside, it's very hard to find a way to stimulate from within. Like for many of us, music is very easy. We all have our favorite songs. You turn it on, you put your headset on, whatever, and you escape into a sea of music, of song. Which, as I said, is definitely a good thing. But I would say it's not the ultimate, because it could also become indulgence in the sense, okay, it's escapism. It doesn't really get you going. It's just it's like almost like a drug that lifts you up on its wings. So it's a step, I would say, but it's not the ultimate step. The ultimate step is when you're able to allow yourself to speak to yourself. Speaking to yourself. The ability to just let your silent space communicate. Now, I know it sounds weird, but those that have done it probably understand what I'm saying. And if you haven't, you have to just try it. Often in the shower is a good place where that happens, but in the shower, usually what happens is that we're usually thinking about our problems and dilemmas. So the shower is a good time to find all kinds of ideas that pop into your head. What am I supposed to do today? Which is why I always suggest in the morning to say Moda'ani, and in the evening before you go to sleep, not to fall asleep with the television on or with the newspaper on your nose, to find something spiritual that you can connect with. Because you see, we need help. We need tools that were not really cultivated to help us speak a soulful language. I would challenge anyone, and you challenge yourself. If someone said to you, speak soulfully, most of us wouldn't have many words to say. We wouldn't know what to say. We'd be able to be, people could say, I have needs. I'd like to be loved. I'd like to find love. There are expressions. But to speak soulfully is an art. It needs language. And above all, it needs a language that we're not trained in. The language we're trained in is very, what's the word I want to use? Utilitarian. Functionary. It's all about functions. I'm going to eat. I'm going to sleep. I'm going to shop. I'm going to interact with someone. I'm going to have coffee. I'm going to have tea. It's all verbs. It's not a state of being. It's about things we do. Actions. And the idea of just being is far, far more elusive, because we're not accustomed to that. But it's not something that's difficult to do if you apply yourself. And it's precisely in a time of silence, in a time when things are not happening, when it's the best time to do it. So I'm not going to suggest doing it every day, because I don't know if you have to have a lot of discipline for that. I begin once a week. You find a time, 10-15 minutes. You have to find, I would suggest, something to read. Something that's purely spiritual. That's not about making money, not about satisfying your physical needs. It has to be something that's completely non-material related. It's critical, because as soon as it's material related, it takes you to the other world, which is survival, protection, aggression, acquisition, etc. You have to find something that's completely spiritual, which is the equivalent of music or equivalent of floating in water, but without those tools either. And that spiritual language will help your soul start speaking. And the more you do this, the more empowered you get with that place. The goal, obviously, is to empower it enough that it becomes a real force in your life. A viable force. A force that becomes a power that affects the rest of your life. The interesting thing is that as I'm speaking about voids, there's also a void that's obviously, there's a healthy void, there's an unhealthy void. A healthy void is the ones I described. It's the frustration before creativity, it's this gestation period, it's the ayin, the seed that deteriorates before it grows into a tree. It's all those in-between places between one state of being to a higher state of being. But then there's also an unhealthy void. The one that results from being hurt, loss, pain, even insecurity that I'm describing. So even that can be transformed. Because a person who has frustration, even if the frustration is coming from a negative place, the frustration can take you two directions. It can make you bitter, demoralize you, and weaken you, or it can be a great motivator to say, I want to get out of this God-forsaken place. I look at and I study sometimes, you see Holocaust survivors who build great businesses and very successful, disproportionate to other parts of the population. No question the reason is very simple. Their anger, their grief, their loss. They had two choices: to completely sink and be overwhelmed by it, or to use it as to catapult them, a springboard, into succeeding, to building successful businesses, powerful families, having children, grandchildren. God knows, I can't imagine how someone can rebuild after such a darkness. But you see it in reality, you can't deny it. So right there is the biggest paradox of all, because the pain doesn't go away. The pain is there, but the pain has been used as a catalyst. So I don't know if we could teach someone the trick, but you can definitely, at least cognitively, make that a goal. You have it, frustration, and who doesn't? So you can just sit and bitch about it and be bitter and say, why is my life so miserable? Look at everybody else, and why can't I have it easier? And why didn't I do this? And why didn't I do that? Full of regrets, full of it could have been, should have been, if I only did that. And we know how much we can obsess over that. We can spend years just obsessing that if I did this differently, that would have happened. If I did that differently, which of course doesn't help anything, because that's all about speculating. If what is that? Where does that bring you? Or you can use it as a powerful catalyst to fuel, like a black hole. You're so frustrated, so use hazeirim bedima bedina yiktzeiru. Those that sow with tears will reap with joy. So tears can be a great powerful force of healing and a great powerful force of building something. Some of the greatest things built were a direct result of a serious void and vacuum. So all of us, we look at our childhoods where we were not in control. Some of us had very difficult childhoods. I've seen people who've used it to achieve greatness. However you measure greatness. I'm not saying greatness again necessarily in the public eye, but the greatness in a real way. And others just remain victims, or they remain overshadowed by their past. So a void, both in a healthy sense and also ones that came to us in unhealthy ways, both can be forces that can lead us to unbelievably great places. So this empty month of Cheshvan speaks to that part of us. It speaks to the part that's invisible, basically. The part that's not dramatic, that doesn't sound like much. Like I said, the greatest things happen when it seems like nothing at all is happening. That's how it is. Those quiet moments. Any mother knows this. Your child grows up, and you have nachas of little children. Does anyone know all the prices that were paid, those quiet little moments that a mother, and a father for that matter, spend with the child? Not when anyone's watching, little things. They accumulate. At some point, it's amazing to see. Everyone should be blessed with such nachas. And we've got our challenges. But then you suddenly see, especially as you get older, you start seeing the rewards of things that no way that you could ever plan that. It comes from due diligence, a certain process, day after day after day. Can you point as a parent to the moment, the day when you did something to your child and that changed it all? There's no way. It's accumulated of thousands of things. When is it? Age 2, age 3, age 4, age 5. Every year, every day had its little thing. And persistence, doing what had to be done, and then something emerges. These are examples. That's one big example, which affects us all, because we're all here now. And God forbid, of course, the other way around as well. Those little things that are not healthily done also produce not such great results. I'm talking on the positive here. The point I'm making is that the great things that happen in life will not be headlines, will not win Academy Awards, movies won't be made about them, but those are the most powerful ones. And it's really learning to embrace that. and learning that it doesn't have to be recognized by everybody else. It's not about politically correct and social norm. It's about being real. And interesting, children help you become something that it's hard to become on your own. I talked about verbs and nouns. A state of being, you want to have a state of being, speak to your child. That's where a child is in a state of be than to do. State of being is a certain type of peace from within that is impossible to replicate. It cannot be created. It has to emerge. So all these are the lessons of this month of Cheshvan. They're teaching us this state of ayin. I mentioned it before, yesh, ayin, and yesh. The word ayin in Hebrew literally means, ayin means nothing. That's what it means, nothingness. But this nothingness is the power of everything. We call yesh ma'ayin, creation ex nihilo, something from nothing. The word nothing is a very meaningless word. What does nothing mean? Nothing. But nothing is relative. You may think something is nothing, and it could be everything. Do you ever see the images of the first second an egg is fertilized before it even splits into two cells? You tell me how that becomes you and I. That's nothing. Literally from nothing. Yes, a sperm, a seed, fertilizes an egg, and then you have a life. It takes some time. Explain that process. Where exactly is the creation happen? We have no way of understanding it. We search for it. Sciences are searching for the Big Bang. They want to recreate conditions as it was the beginning, whenever that beginning was. Bereshit. Because they want to see what it was like, what gases were released, what energies, because everybody wants, but no one can ever get to the point of the beginning, because as soon as you get there, it's untouchable. I don't know, today this is dangerous, but I remember as a kid, I don't know about you, I used to like to break these thermometers to get the mercury out, not to eat it, God forbid, but just that type of, it was like a creature from another planet, right? You touch it and it moves, it breaks into parts, and it comes back together. I learned a big lesson from it, that as soon as you try to capture it, it escapes you. Then I read somewhere that silkworms, the art of drawing silk out of a silkworm, is completely the art of restraint. It's years for the master silk, what do they call them? There's some word for it. And the years of training is not how to get the silk out, it's how not to get it out. How to just the slightest touch and let it come out on its own. You try a little more, it's like, when you try to untangle wires, what happens? You get them more tangled. Because you're impatient, this. It's the art of restraint, the ability to know how with a scalpel, know how to go into a place and instead of knowing how to pull, how to stop, how to yield. You'll see the greatest things in life is where, we call it the sensuality, where the senses meet a place that's beyond senses. As soon as you try to own it, it loses its mystique. And that's what we'd love. We'd love to have both. We'd love to have the mystique and own it. Be able to put the mystique in a bottle. Whenever I need it, I'll just open the bottle and I got my mystique. I don't mean perfume now. But mystique is by definition mystique. It means it's not owned and controlled by you. It is something that is always remains somewhat elusive. You tell me anything real in life that doesn't have that elusive element. There's nothing in life that's real. Which only tells us that we're not so real. Because if we were real, we would have no problem with elusive things. But we want to own. And I have no doubt that comes from an insecure place, not from a secure place. Insecure people need to own things. Secure people don't need to own things. They have no problem with things that are elusive, and so on. I would even say the battle between reason and faith is somewhat like this. Reason gives you the illusion of control. I understand it all. And if I believe, that's either a crutch for the fools, or it's something that I have no control over. Well, true faith, I'm not talking about the faith of the fools or the faith of children. I'm not talking about faith that's absence of reason. True faith, the idea of accepting something that's beyond your reason, super-rational, not irrational, it requires far more security, far more confidence, self-confidence than does reason. Because reason, you create the illusion, I understand it, I figured it out. You look at all the great thinkers in history, and I especially quote Einstein on this. The ones that came up with the most powerful scientific theories, it all is connected to imagination. And imagination is not exactly reason. Imagination can't call it necessarily pure faith either, but reason for sure not. It's imagining something that's actually not reasonable. If it was reasonable, you don't need imagination. It's imagining something that no one ever thought of before. And then, yes, then we want to own that as well. But there's always the step that remains elusive. So it's really about the dance of knowing how to balance the two. I'm not suggesting suddenly that we don't have any reason or we don't have any things that we could own. Like I said, you have to know when you invest, you have to know when to let go. You have to know when to immerse, invest, and when to let go. And the letting go, however, is the key. Because the letting go is when the things really blossom and become great. I'm looking for it. I don't know if any of you have ever heard this. Over Sukkot, somewhere where I was over Sukkot, told me the story that there was this, what are they called? Ornithologists. Who are the bird ornithologists they're called, right? He was from Sweden. His name was Gustav Eriksson. Anyway, interesting story. So he gathered many different species of birds, rare birds, and so on. Listen to the story. It's amazing. I'm looking for a source. I can't say I haven't verified it. I've looked online. Can't come up with anything. So I hope it's not made up. But it's a good made up story anyway, if it's made up. I'm just giving you full disclosure that I don't have. So Gustav, he had this bird collection, very rare bird collection, very valuable. And, he treated all the birds humanely, but one day he had to travel, so he gave one of his friends or one of his, assistants to take care. So, as Mazel would have it, the brilliant guy found it musty or muggy in the room where the birds are, so he opened the window. And of course, what happened? All the birds flew out because they weren't caged. They were inside the building. So all the birds, everything was gone. Gustav Eriksson came back. He was like, completely distraught because this is years he had a relationship with the birds. I'm not now justifying whether caging the birds was the right thing to do in the first place. But interesting thing happened. He used to play for the birds to calm them down every day. He used to play classical music, Mozart and some other pieces. So what did he do? He started playing the music. And lo and behold, what happened? The birds returned. Bird by bird returned. That's a story I heard. As I say, it's amazing to me if this is a true story. But I'm thinking to myself, why would birds return? Birds are by nature, don't want to be confined. What is it about the music? So, I thought to myself as a metaphor, because I think music is a powerful example of resonance. Music touches us. And it has that element. A music that has soothed you, you'll hear it, you're going to recognize it. It's actually an analogy by the Baal Shem Tov, I believe, with Rosh Hashanah, why we blow shofar. Because the shofar is like simulates the cry of a child. So it's like a child that got lost in the woods, and his father's looking for the child. So the child keeps crying, and then the father hears this cry, he recognizes the cry of his child. I don't know if you know this, after the Holocaust, so a lot of children were given away to convents and convents and Christians who took them in to save them. And there are many that still remain there. But some parents did survive. And some parents actually made a condition. There's a whole story with the previous pope. But many children remained in some of these monasteries and other places, convents, that through Europe. And when some of the parents or family members came back after the war, the people who took them in denied that they were there, or they said they got lost or killed, or whatever. So one of the things they would do is they would play either some Jewish music or say Shema Yisrael or Modani, some of the prayers, and children would respond. So there was once in one convent where they went in, and the father started saying Shema Yisrael, and he heard his son started crying and saying Shema. So it was clear. In other words, there's some things that are embedded inside of us that touch us, that you can always recall and you can reconnect. Now, what's the connection to what I'm discussing here? My point is that there's really two parts within us. There's the part that has gone undercover as we've turned into adults, replaced by many of our tools and our mechanisms. There's a part inside of us that is very pure, always remains there, but is unfortunately neglected. And as anything that's neglected, it goes to sleep. So we need things that help resonate, that help touch that part inside of us. There's no doubt that we have it, because look, we all have moments where something touches us. So why is it touching you? Like someone says something, or you hear something, or you read something. Why is it touching you? It means that you have it inside of you. It wouldn't touch you if you didn't have it before you read it. What you're reading is just a listening. It's just awakening. Like that music that I'm describing. So this is the key challenge. How do we access and reconnect to that part inside of us? That's the challenge. I'm not suggesting it's easy, but I'm saying that it's not as difficult as you think. You have to first know that it's there waiting. Inside of you right now are forces that are invisible, are quiet, are dormant, waiting to be released. The challenge and the obligation, responsibility you have is to do something to access it. You won't be able to control it, but you'll be able to put on certain switches and something will respond. That's the point. You can't control it. He played the music and the birds returned. He couldn't go with a net and start gathering the birds. It wouldn't work. You have to do certain things and then it returns. It's like letting the bird go, they say. Let the bird fly and see if it returns. Instead, we want to control it. We want to see how do I control it? How do I own it? So this is what this month teaches us. And each of us have the power to help. We have the ability to help each other because we are made of the same stuff. And we all have the same type of souls. We're different people, but we all have similar things that touch us. And I think if something touches you, one of the great things to do is to share it with someone else. You never know what that can do for someone. You never know, because it may be the thing that will switch something on and give somebody strength. And there's never too much of this. You have to keep going because we have a constant, relentless attack from the outer world trying to dominate our psyches. So you have to have as much as you can, the more the merrier, of building, reinforcing, and strengthening those inner forces. So, if we were given the month of Cheshvan before Tishrei, it would be far more difficult. Because then how do you deal with the invisible? So we have a month where you're given a lot of power. As I said, sated, saturation, and satiation. Yeah. Once you're empowered with that, now comes another month, and now let's see what you can do with a little silence, with the quiet, and the quietude of things, and build those type of forces. And obviously we all can help each other in this process. So let me conclude saying like this. This should be today's Rosh Chodesh, it's a very blessed month, coming with the power of the holidays that we just experienced, and that we should use this month well to find the empty month. Should help us find the empty space, but not empty. It's quite full. It's just very quiet. It's very silent. The sound of silence, which is far louder than the sound of words. And learn to embrace your silence. Don't be afraid to be silent. You know, when you walk down the street, one of the signs of a thief and a criminal is that when you say hello to them, they don't just say hello back, they always have to talk. Because they cannot afford the awkwardness of silence, because they may be caught. You see people just constantly covering up their tracks with words, noise. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean everyone is a chatterbox, is a thief. But every thief is a chatterbox, that I can tell you. Not that they tell you the real things, but it's a cover-up. You know, you cover up what you want to do, like Churchill said, during the time of war, that truth is so precious, you have to surround it with an army of lies. So many of us, that's what we do well. We know how to, cover up. People are great at. The smarter they are, they've got great, it's called smoke screens. A lot of sizzle and noise and distractions and decoys, it's called. Any of you decoy masters here who know how to deflect? Yeah. Some, not me, but some of my best friends. Yes. Well, listen, we all need it at times, and when you need it, you need it. You just don't want to become it. That's the thing. You don't want to become your masks. If you have to use it once in a while, it's one thing. But once you become your mask, it's big trouble. You have to know who's who. So may God bless us all to embrace ourselves that way and find people that embrace us for who we are, not for what we project. and our business cards and all the other so-called arbiters and definitions of value in our lives, and hopefully we can all help each other in this regard. And I'm here to help you in any way I can help, and hopefully the other way you reciprocate. And it should be a blessed month and a blessed year, and we shall continue this journey next Wednesday. And continue, the small break we had over the holidays. Last week I did a recorded class, which I sent out. And we will continue here. And please leave us your email so we can stay in touch with any special announcements or changes. Philip is giving his class tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. So if you want information, please let me know. And it's great to see you. Great to see some of you I haven't seen in a while. And as I said again, everyone should be blessed in every possible way, and find new openings and new opportunities as you access the vacuum and the void within inside of you. Thank you very much.